All right, everyone, let's talk about big money accessories and jackpots, things that could sell for 100,000 plus gold if you end up getting the right combination of stats. But even if you don't end up getting a jackpot accessory, what stats do you want to be on the lookout for so that you know to end up listing it on the auction house instead of dismantling it? Because if you dismantle an accessory, if it's tier 3, you're going to probably get between 10 to 30 gold worth of materials, depending on when you watch this video. Of course, they might have devalued, but if you're confident that you're going to sell it for a decent chunk more than the dismantling value, you probably want to end up posting it on the auction house instead. So what stats to be on the lookout for? And let's kind of go over the priority order, because the priority order in tier 3 is going to be a little bit different than in the last video where I talked about tier 2 accessories and lower, because in tier 3, the number one thing by far, without a doubt, that you want to be on the lookout for is the engraving effects. And when you end up getting your tier 3 accessory drops, as you kind of hover over the accessories and take a look at them, that should probably be the first thing that your eye kind of hovers towards, is not the bonus effect, not the quality. We'll talk about those in a second, but the number one thing by far that's going to determine the value of the accessory is going to be the random engraving effects. And you're going to be looking for two things in particular. Number one is a good combination of engravings, because obviously the less sought after and not as good engravings are not going to sell for as much, but also very importantly is the value of the roll. And you'll notice that one thing in particular that a lot of these jackpot accessories that have sold for over 100,000 gold share is that they have a double +3 roll. Now, this double +3 roll is only actually possible with 1370 accessories. You can't end up getting a double +3 roll with 1325 accessories, but that doesn't mean that 1325 accessories won't sell. If you still end up getting two good engravings that rolled +2/+2, or even in some cases +2/+1 with other stats that are good, they can still end up selling for way, way more than what their dismantling value is. So that doesn't just mean automatically salvage all your 1325 and lower accessories, because if you still get the right combination of stuff, it can still be a decent chunk of money. But it's these 1370 +3/+3 rolls that have two very solid engravings. These are going to be what have the potential to end up being the jackpot, the 100,000 plus sellers. Now, I'm sure a big question that a lot of people have is, what are the engraving effects that are considered good and more sought after? What's going to be a good combination of engravings? Because there's a whole lot of them in the game, and obviously there's some of them that are good and some of them that are not so good. So what I wanted to do is I'll go through a list here, and then I'll share with you guys a little trick that you can kind of use in the future, so you don't really have to rely on my little list here. But I'll go through a list here, and as I start off at the top of the list, they're going to be the most valuable and the most sought after engravings. And number one is obviously going to be Grudge. That's by far the number one most sought after engraving on both accessories and ability stones, but there's a whole bunch of other ones as well. And as I kind of move through the list, they're going to go from ascending order to descending in terms of their desirability, sought afterness, I guess their value in a sense. So let me just kind of go through and mention like 10 to 12 of them. Obviously, number one is going to be Grudge, Hitmaster, Awakening, Adrenaline, Keen Blunt, Supercharge, All-Out Attack, Ambush Master, Precise Dagger, Master's Tenacity, Spirit Absorb, Curse Doll, Expert, Raid Captain, Barricade, and a couple of those that I mentioned towards the end. Obviously not going to be nearly as valuable and sought after as some of the stuff that I mentioned towards the start of that list, but nonetheless, that's going to be kind of like the upper third to upper half of engravings in terms of their desirability and how much people are willing to spend on them when it comes to accessories. Now, a little trick that you can also end up using for this, so you don't have to rely on a list, is as a generalization, and this is a general rule of thumb, if you end up going to engraving recipes and you end up going to like epic engravings, which I just like to use for a rule of thumb here, the engravings that end up selling for more on the market are, of course, going to be the more sought after ones. And because of that, they're going to end up generally being more valuable, not just the engraving books on the market, but also if you get those engraving rules on accessories and to an extent ability stones, they're also going to end up being more sought after. So a lot of the things that I mentioned in that list, you can end up seeing here towards the top: Grudge, Hitmaster, Awakening, Adrenaline, so on and so forth. And you can kind of go down through the list here. And obviously, as the price, generally speaking, this is a general rule of thumb, as the price gets lower, they're going to be less sought after and a bit less valuable when it comes to accessories. And you can see that a lot of the engravings kind of here at the bottom of the list, which are just a couple of gold, are not as going to be as sought after when it comes to accessories. So don't use this as a catch-all for absolutely everything, but it's a general good rule of thumb that you can use to kind of help guide you pricing what engravings are going to be good on accessories. So let's end up going back to the auction house and let's talk about some other stats that are going to be important. I really wanted to focus on engravings a lot because that's by far the most important stat when it comes to tier 3 accessories and what's going to end up determining their value, but that's not the only one. And if you actually notice, like a lot of these jackpot accessories, and these are confirmed sales, by the way. So if you end up seeing this is stuff that has confirmed sold on the market, you can see this is actually all stuff that sold within the last day. You have to be a little bit careful with this as a tool because sometimes you can see some sketchy sales with real money trading and whatnot, but it gives you a general rule of thumb, a general guideline to kind of see what are the top accessories that sold. And you'll see that a lot of them, it's not just the engravings that are good. There's a couple of other factors as well, but these are not going to be as important as the engravings. So let's talk about the next one, which is the bonus effect. This bonus effect is going to be a stat, and just like I talked about in the last video, there's kind of a priority order that people are generally looking for when it comes to their stats. And number one is going to end up being specialization. That's probably the most desirable stat, but in a close second / third place is going to be swiftness and crit. And the combination of specialization, swiftness, and crit are going to be the top 3 more desirable bonus effects that people are looking for on their accessories. And then you've got the other 3 stats, domination, expertise, and endurance, which are not going to be as desirable as specialization, swiftness, and crit. But this is not nearly as important as the engraving effects. If you do end up getting a good set of engravings and also a good bonus effect, though, that is going to bolster the value of the accessory, and it's really a combination of these things that's going to allow you to end up getting an accessory that could sell for 100,000 plus gold. But let's talk about the last thing as well, and this is something that is not as important as it was in like tier 2 and lower, and that is the quality. And notice how even a lot of these accessories that sold for like 100,000 plus gold, you'll see that a decent chunk of these do not actually have an incredibly high quality. And that is because the quality is not nearly as important as the other factors, especially the engravings, but even the stats. And if you actually compare like a 0 quality accessory to a 100 quality accessory, 0 quality doesn't mean that it doesn't have any bonus stats. There's actually a pretty small range between a 0 quality accessory and a 100 quality accessory. And just as an example for like rings, if you end up taking a 0 quality 1370 ring, it's going to have 130 of that bonus stat. Whereas if you take a 100 quality item level 1370 ring, it's going to have a 180 roll to its bonus effect. So the difference between 0 to 100 quality only actually boosts the bonus effect from 130 to 180, which is not a massive increase. It's still 25-ish% or so. But, you know, the engravings are going to be way more important. Obviously, min-maxers are still looking for a good combination of everything, but just because you don't get a good quality roll, and even if you don't end up getting a good bonus effect, if it's not one of those more desirable stats like specialization, swiftness, crit, if you get carried with a good combination of engravings, you could still end up having an accessory that ends up selling for a good amount of money. And the last thing I'll mention here is the penalty engraving, which is not as important as the other stuff, but generally speaking, people don't want to end up getting a bad penalty engraving. Just like with your ability stones, you have your 2 positive engravings, and then you have your 1 negative one. Accessories work very similar. So I found that generally movement speed is one that people really don't like. And obviously you could see that like this one has a double +3 positive roll, and it only has a negative roll of +1. So, you know, it doesn't mean that if it has a high negative roll, like this one still sold and it had a +3 defense reduction roll, but if it's like a movement speed and it's a +3, you know, that's probably going to take a little bit of value away from the accessory, even if it still has good engraving. So if you obviously got lucky on that part of your roll as well, and you didn't get a bad penalty and it rolled, you know, +1, +2 instead of +3, that's going to end up working in your favor to increase the value of your accessory as well. So that's really what you want to focus on, especially with these tier 3 accessories. It's definitely a bit different compared to the last video where the focus was not quite as strong on the engravings as it was on some other stuff, but it's all about the engravings when it comes to jackpots and decent selling tier 3 accessories. So that's what you want to be on the lookout for. I know this video has been pretty highly requested, so I wanted to talk about it, kind of put this out there. I hope this video helped out, and if it did and you guys enjoyed, consider leaving a quick like, consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this in the future, and feel free to check out the Twitch stream, twitch.tv/salt, where I'll be streaming Lost Ark as well as other games. Thanks again, everyone. Take care, and until next time.